Best of R slash malicious compliance episode 8. Inspired from you slash fiercer77's story from yesterday. I do tree work for a living, and the last boss I had was the kind of guy who thought he knew everything, and demanded that you did things his way when he was on site. The day this story takes place was no different than any other time that boss decided to show up. We were there to drop a massive sunburst locust tree, over 3 feet wide at the trunk and branches that spanned over 60 feet. It was a beautiful tree, but the customer wanted it gone. Sadly, the customer had a brand new, empty, shed on one side of his property. There was enough room to drop the tree, but only if aimed just right. I set a pull rope into the tree and had my crew set our winch up on a tree along the back line of the lot to pull the locust over. My boss was not happy with my choice of felling direction and demanded in his "I want to speak to your manager" voice that my guys move the winch to a tree 40 feet to the right, and told me that I was to aim the tree in his newly selected direction, directly towards the shed. I told him that was a bad idea, but he wouldn't listen. He wanted to show the customer that he had absolute power over us and used one of his favorite lines: "If you don't want to be here, then leave." He knew I was wearing golden handcuffs and leaving wasn't financially responsible of me with a young family at home. I accepted that he was not going to allow me, or my guys, to put the winch anywhere close to where it should have been, and set to putting my notch into the tree. I started aiming the tree to where I knew it should have been aimed, but was again screamed at by my boss because I wasn't following his direct orders. This is where I finally gave in and aimed the tree directly towards where he wanted me to, towards she shed. My aim could not have been more true. The notch and back cut were absolutely textbook. My guys applied power to the winch and we put that tree down exactly where it was aimed. The new vinyl shed. It exploded. My boss did too. The customer calmly walked out, put his hand on my shoulder, looked directly at my boss and exclaimed, "Sean did exactly what you told him to. When will you be installing my new shed?" I walked away from the two of them immediately, as I did not need to be directly in the middle of that conversation when I knew I still needed to get the tree from the backyard and into the truck. Things then got even worse for my boss. He was the kind of boss to shout orders but not actually do anything himself. That day he decided to try to help out by taking the climbing saw, which is not set up to be used on the ground, and start hacking away at branches using only one hand on the saw. Very dangerous. We all knew that we would get screamed at if we said anything to him, so we did our best to stay clear of the whirling dervish and do what we could at a safe distance. 5 or so minutes into his arbor assault, I hear him start screaming and see a chainsaw flying across the yard. Remember earlier where I said what he was doing was dangerous? The saw kicked back at him and he put his left hand up as a reaction, damn near cutting off 3 fingers from his left hand. We managed to get that idiot bandaged up and driven off to the hospital, where the med staff were able to save the fingers that eventually had to build the customer a new shed. TLDR, boss didn't trust my judgment and as a result I got to nuke a shed with a big tree, causing him to freak out and almost cut off 3 of his fingers with a chainsaw. Edit. I no longer work for the moron. Haven't for a few years now. Thank you. Next. Apologies for mobile formatting and English as my second language, etc. My parents were abusive and neglectful my entire childhood, from about 6 or 7 to 17 when they dropped me off in the States to attend college. They were also hyper-religious and insisted upon corporeal punishment so as to not spoil the child, according to some verse in Proverbs. Once I turned 14 I started resisting when my father would attempt to literally lay me over his lap and spank me. They decided I was too old for that type of punishment anymore. No shit. And my mother started slapping me in the face instead. She would hit me so hard my ear would actually ring. And I found out recently that I've only got 40% of hearing in my left ear because of it. Now for the malicious compliance part of things. I'd been given a list of biblical principles to follow, the most important one of course being to honor one's father and mother. They were thrilled when I decided to dig further into the Bible. Except I was searching for and consequently found the verse from the Sermon on the Mount on which Jesus tells people to not resist evil but to turn the other cheek if someone were to smite them in the face. I started turning my face and offering my mother my other cheek when she'd hit me, which she was quite a fan of because she could hit me extra times. My father eventually asked why I was doing that, and then they found out I had turned to their biblical principles to basically call my mother evil, according to their precious Jesus. They were upset about it, not because of the evil but because it was apparently passive-aggressive resistance. I reminded them it was a biblical order and claimed I was trying to live more biblically. I kept doing it every time. It was small acts like that which, even though they hurt, got me through high school until I could leave and go to college. I completely cut off contact with them about 5 years ago, and it's been great. TL. Doctor, my abusive parents used Bible verses to justify their physical abuse. I turned a verse against them to subtly call my mother evil according to Jesus. Thank you. Next. Working as a public affairs rep for a military unit, I floated around all levels of the brigade command. Problem was, second lieutenants think all lower enlisted work for them, regardless of the actual job location. I had a second LT who I was completely unaffiliated with send me a batch of photos with the basic demand: create a PowerPoint presentation by end of day. After an email battle back and forth between him, myself and my direct officer, a captain, my captain said to give him what he wants with a wink. I selected, at random, photos provided by the second LT and made a mishmash of several slides with no coherent pattern or discernible storyline. Edit, they came in mixed anyway, so I didn't really have to try to mix it up that much. I hadn't been provided with details, and this project destroyed my productivity for the day as my normal duties were placed on hold, and thankfully my officer took over so I could focus on this piece. He was a great guy to work with, so in the end of day, we submitted a series of PowerPoint slides complete with randomly assigned photos and no context. The presentation was due the next morning, and I was immediately out of office after sending the presentation over via email. To clarify, this was a presentation to be given to colonels and higher-ranking officers. We were never asked to make a presentation like that again, and that second LT avoided me from then on. Edit, typo in the title, not sure how to correct. It should read, but failed to provide details? Thank you. Next. Long-time lurker. Happy to have my own story to share. TLDR at bottom. Bit of backstory. I work as a machine operator in a factory type setting. I'm responsible for 2 lines of moving product with the fairly simple job of keeping the machines running and basic quality control. I've held my current position for 3 years, and frankly most weeks I spend more time with these machines than my wife. I know when something isn't right. Our engineering department doesn't always agree. 2 days ago one of my 2 machines begins making a clanking sound. I give it a quick once over. Seems like 2 metal parts are slapping together. Probably just a loose bolt. I grab a radio and call for an engineer. Oh great, it's one of the newer ones fresh out of school. He listens to it run for a few minutes. Him, it's running fine. Why did you call me out here? Me, don't you hear that noise? Him, it's fine. It always sounds like that. He makes a note in his log and leaves. The machine is still operational and my shift ends in 20 minutes so I'll let it go. The next day I come in for my shift and it's still making the same noise. I ask the previous shift's operator about it. They repeat a similar story with the same engineer. 3 hours into my shift the noise has gone from occasional to near constant. I call for an engineer to come check it out again. Our newest engineer comes down. Him, what's wrong this time? Me, you seriously don't hear that? Can you just give it a quick check? Him, you guys need to stop calling us down here for this. Look at it, it's running fine. He makes another note in his log and walks off. 4 hours later the clanging has gotten louder and the machine is beginning to jostle with each impact. Concerned I again call for an engineer. This time he doesn't even bother inspecting the machine. Him, damn it Kingler, I told you, it's fine. Don't call us back down here unless it breaks. Q compliance. I run it as is for the rest of my shift. The noise and movement of the machine growing worse the entire time. I check it every other hour. Hasn't broken yet. I inform the relief shift of what's going on and go home. I come in today and the noise is nearly deafening and the entire product line is shaking with the strength of the impacts. The previous shift informs me that the engineering department still hasn't looked at it. I stop the machine and give it a quick look. Still not broken. I run it as is. 10 hours into my shift and we are suddenly bombarded by a symphony of metallic noises and screeches. Half of the machine is now on the floor, while the other half gyrates wildly as it attempts to continue. I press the emergency stop and make the call. He begins to complain before he even makes it to my lines. Him, listen damn it, I told you. What the hell did you do to the machine, Kingdom? It broke. For the last 2 hours of my shift I enjoyed the luxury of only having to focus on one of my product lines and the blissful noises of our good friend being royally chewed by his boss as an entire engineer crew is now attempting to salvage the machine. When I clocked out it was still lying in ruins. TLDR, engineer refuses to inspect unusual sounds coming from machine. Machine eventually destroys itself in a marvelous way. Edit. While this blew up. Currently reading comments. I'll try to address some of the more common questions in a comment below. Edit 2. Thanks for the gold, kind stranger. Update. As expected, there was no significant fallout. I came in this morning and the machine was operational again. According to the operator I relieved it was down for a total of 6 hours. No one lost their job and the company didn't lose any significant amount of money. Probably. I don't actually know how expensive the replacement parts were, but considering the speed they had it back up they likely had some on hand. Thank you. Next. Not my malicious compliance but that of a small town. Keep in mind I was around 14-15 at the time, so the political details are from the adults recanting this story. We lived near this nice lady but was 2 farms over. Backstory. Our small Midwestern town had unfortunately elected a mayor who seemed alright but was a big city ideal tyrant. Once in office he revealed his true colors, forcing out men who tried to preserve our way of life. As a town we were growing, adding more housing because people were moving in from a big city 50 miles away. They loved our low taxes and lower property costs just 50 miles down the highway from the city, which had a 3-5 times higher tax rate and property value. A home which cost $60k here could be worth $200, $250k in the city depending on location. Immediately they implemented a bunch of policies and cut services that the city used to provide. The scene. Our city had new houses going up around her small farm, with new house literally on ground she used to own. Taken by the city when they put in roads to allow for new housing and a school football field. Her home was down to 2 small pastures including a shelter for the animals, a barn, and her house with detached garage. A few sheep and some miniature horses occupied the pastures, keeping the grass down. One homecoming weekend as fireworks went off the fence got knocked down and her animals got out. Months later this lady inquired about apartments at the local Presbyterian complex for the elderly. The office worker inquired about her current residence when she broke, spilling the beans. Outraged he told members of the church, and via the small town grapevine it spread like wildfire. The demands. The city determined her fencing was inadequate and needed replaced. However, new regulations would not allow for wire panel fencing. She would have to comply with wrought iron or wood fencing that meets code. Weeds growing up near the fencing was a code violation and the city would take care of it, charging her for the labor. The shelter didn't meet code and was to be torn down. Missing shingles and flaking paint on the barn. She had to replace the roof and paint the barn. Replacing any trusses or sideboards showing rot. No door on the barn meant she had to put a door on it as well. New construction requiring permit. House had bad shingles and siding. Siding was from the early 1900s and probably had lead paint, so she had to replace it. Detached garage had foundation issues and needed to be torn down and or a new attached garage with foundation built. She had 2 weeks left of the 30 days notice to comply. Sorry for the long filler. Now the compliance. The next week the pastors and priests told their congregation of this woman's plight and a plan was formed. 2 lawyers from the Baptist and Catholic Church filed paperwork for the permits and something to buy us more time. Local businesses and donators covered the cost of materials. Some contractors, construction workers, landscapers and electricians even donated labor. Just 3 weeks later hordes of volunteers arrived to clean, install fence, roof, side, install an automatic door for the barn, build a new shelter for the animals and build an attached garage. A crew had already torn the old garage down while the cement company poured her a new foundation. All this was accomplished over 1 weekend. Nuns handed out food and drinks donated by the local grocery whilst priests and pastors worked hand in hand with the congregation. My father told me that morning we would be transporting and keeping her animals for her while the construction was going on. We also helped with fencing. A few things needed polished over the coming weeks, but nonetheless our small town told the mayor and council where to stick their policies. TLDR. Tyrant city officials try to kick a widow off her farm unless she rebuilds everything in 30 days. The small town then rebuilds her entire farm. Edit. Thanks for posting the r/humansbeanbras sub that I never heard of before. I figured it was malicious due to the mayor and council trying to force her out wanting her land. Also this was 30 years ago to property values are very different now. Edit 2. Thanks for the gold. For those wondering what happened to the mayor and council members, I will ask my dad during the holidays. That is why this story is coming back to me. My mother made sure for Thanksgiving and Christmas to invite her over to join. A tradition my wife and I now have continued. Thank you. Next. So the chick in our group decided that our Christmas theme this year was going to be a Christmas movie marathon and each person would pick their favorite Christmas movie to decorate their cubicle. I replied Die Hard. She comes over and asks me how I am going to decorate my cubicle for this theme. Guess I need to find a mannequin to duct tape to a chair. Thank you. Next. I'm not proud of this one, but I've been told I should put this up to show how my malicious compliance can be used for evil, not good. The scene. Corporate opening of offices. Event security as big marquees put up for staff, senior management and directors to do presentations about how moving to their 3 purpose-built offices and manufacturing building would be awesome. Most of the day was tours of the buildings, the presentations, then a meal with some drinks, so they need security staff on the buildings to keep people on the tour and door supervisors on the bars, stopping the food being eaten early. Roughly 40 staff, all with radios and earpieces. We amused ourselves trying to get song titles/lines into our messages as we progressed the tour around, and as each building was emptied the staff moved on to the next. End of the evening was coming around and we still have staff on the buildings as people leave. The night security come on and man the security office for the whole site, so staff are brought back to the marquees. I'm supervising the radios coming back and our senior manager goes home as it's just the takedown of the marquees and getting our staff stood down so they can go home. Malicious compliance won by staff. The production staff realize we still have over 2 hours left on our mandated 5-hour minimum shift. They want to get their money's worth, so ask me if the staff can help with the clear up and then they'll let us go early and we'll still be paid. It means stacking chairs, taking down tables and some picking up of litter, etc. Something to do to pass the time, I think, and with 35 staff standing around it will be at most half an hour, so 1.5 hours paid for doing nothing, just traveling home. The staff don't think so and state that they want to stay with their role of door staff or security. Malicious compliance on their part, I think. Staff, we're not paid to stack chairs, we're paid to be security. I tried to explain that as production were paying our wages they could ask us to do anything reasonable as part of the contract, but no, several staff were adamant they wouldn't do it. All this played out in loud voices in front of the production people. Malicious compliance too by me. We've now lost the next contract with the production company by this time, so I'm pissed off because my boss will be giving me the bollocking and asking me if I should be supervising/managing any other events. Me. So you're all saying that for the next 2 hours you're only going to do security? Staff, that's what we're paid for. Me. Right, all of you back to your positions now for the next 2 hours or you can leave now but you won't be paid. Staff, but the buildings are empty and there's site security on. Me. You had the option to help with the cleanup but you only want to do security, so back to your positions. There follows 5 minutes of debate ending with 2 staff walking off and the rest bitching and moaning. I am helped by a few of the staff who know me and how I work, who get them all on their positions. At the end of the shift I go around and get them all to sign for their shift end, and it's a very quiet bus that I'm on as we go home. Malicious compliance on my part now, I think so, hence the MC². Our next contracted job was at a famous game console launch down in London. As the job was not strictly security, but more of a meet and greet, I offered it to the staff who helped at the corporate job above. When questioned by the security staff later about why they weren't offered it, I had to tell them that I took into account that they are only paid to work security, so I didn't think they'd want to do it. As it was years ago, I didn't think I should post it in r/am I the asshole. TL. Dr. Production staff asked us to help clean up at the end of an event. Staff worked a rule, said that they were security not cleaners, made them all go and guard empty buildings. Site security was covering them anyway, made sure that the next really cool event was only offered to the staff who helped that night.